Isn't it funny? I was thinking about just before starting, but we always enter podcasts the same way. So I thought I'm going to do it
Changing up
today. So changing it up. We're on episode 22. I'm Jake Howard. I'm with Luke Manning, and we're discussing the week's events, which was primarily, there's two great ones. It was the President's Cup, which was entertaining, if not competitive. It was an exhibition, but entertaining nonetheless, and a great event in Spain.
Yeah, I think you picked the President's Cup last week. You said it was going to be very much like the Solheim Cup, where it was largely over on day one, but the international team would make enough of a comeback to keep you interested. And then by the end, it was never really in doubt for the Americans, and that's how it played out. It's a bit more excitement in the DP World Tour and the Spanish Open with a playoff there deciding the result.
Yep, definitely. Let's look at the President's Cup first. It was very entertaining. Like that first day was a absolute. The matches were quite close, but it was a trouncing in the end, wasn't it? It's to be expected that there is it's very mismatched. There's a much larger gap between the US and the international team than what there is in the US and the Euro team based on world rankings. The Euro team is maybe even closer to the US than what the Euro is to the internationals, if that makes sense. So that would be a better competition, Euros versus internationals, but probably still not as close as what we see in the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, certainly on paper, it's a David and Goliath sort of struggle for the international guys, and the experience that they have in the team just is not really up by the raw talent. And the Americans have got a great blend of experience and raw talent, which is very hard to beat. Hence the final score, which saw the Americans take it out 18.5 to 11.5.
Yep. I think one thing that the President's Cup may need to look at again or reconsider is just how many points are available. I think, as with anything, the longer you go on, the more the top level talent shines through. Like they say that 4 rounds is better at identifying a champion than what 3 rounds is. And that's a sort of a complaint against LIV or something that sort of some of the CGMs like to say about LIV. It's just not as competitive. You don't get the right winner all the time. And with so many points available in the President's Cup, there's just less to chance. If you're just looking at eventually the numbers will win overall, you just, so that's one thing that maybe they need to reconsider because they did increase it recently, I believe.
Yeah, compared to, I think it's 25 in Solheim. I'm not sure what the Ryder Cup number is, but it was noticeable, the extra number of matches in the President's Cup compared to the Solheim Cup only a few weeks ago. And I think there's some validity in what you say there. These events are generally set up to favour the US team, particularly where the PGA Tour owns this particular event, which did raise a question in my mind about Royal Montreal and the setup of the course there. When I was watching, I observed it to be long, rough, very lush conditions, soft greens that were producing a lot of spin and grab, and it looked like a usual PGA Tour stop. And then you think, isn't the home team supposed to be able to put their thumb on the scale in terms of setup? And if that actually is the case, what was Weir doing? Because it looked like just creating a perfect PGA Tour environment for the Americans to dominate on.
So there's probably a lot of what was Weir thinking throughout the entire event. So we look at the final result. Yeah, I know. So look at the final result. So the US won 18.5 points to 11.5 points. The internationals did quite well actually to earn their 4 points, I think it was, or 3.5 points. Or 4.5 points, actually. They were on 7, so they've ended on 11.5. So they did well to earn that many points in the singles because they were quite mismatched. So looking at breaking down the 4 balls, which is typically where the internationals are more competitive, Xander and Finau defeated J Day and Ben Ahn. They were 1 up. Morikawa, Thigala bet Adam Scott and Minwoo Lee 1 up. Scotty Scheffler and Russ Henley bet Sungjae Im and Tom Kim 3 and 2. Wyndham Clark and Keegan Bradley bet Taylor Pendrith and Bez 1 up. Pat Cantlay and Sam Burns defeated Matsuyama and Corey Connors 2 and 1. So pretty close, but that all just fell out in the wash on the US side.
Yeah, for me, the interesting story is around the 5-0 sweep of the 4 balls on Thursday, then the complete reversal of that in the foursomes on Friday. Social media was alight after the first session. This tournament or this event's a joke. throw it in the bin. Let's get just a PGA Tour versus LIV competition going. And then all of a sudden, those sort of cries were put squarely in their place the next day, where the internationals, quite unexpectedly in my sort of sense of it, reversed it and did a sweep of their own. I think possibly the only ever sweep they've done of a session. After that, I went to, has Jay issued a directive here overnight? Was there a mercy plea or a mercy directive issued by the PGA Tour to save the President's Cup and the American team to take the foot off the pedal? What was your sense, Jake?
I was thinking that as well. It would certainly, there's certainly a case to be made. I think that what probably, or at least in one match's case, maybe puts bed to that is the fact that Matsuyama and Sung Jae Im, they had 7 or 8 birdies in a row. They won 7 and 6 on day 2, but I think that sort of, I don't think you could easily script 7 birdies in a row.
You can't. But then if you look at the remainder of the event, where the Americans went 3-1, 3-1, and then what did they finish? The singles in 6, 3 and 3. They pretty much dominated the remaining sessions, didn't they? A skeptical mind would say they took their foot off the pedal to let the internationals, or took their foot off the throat of the internationals and let them get up off the canvas, only to toy with them over the remaining session.
Yeah, certainly. That's I think the other thing to consider is that on day 1, a few of the guys mentioned that the crowd support wasn't fantastic. So we heard that from the internationals and then from a few others as well. Day 2, they were a lot more vocal. We saw a few people in the crowd that were certainly getting things going, but it made its way out that they are paid actors. So maybe that's where the PGA Tour possibly put their thumb on the scale and brought more of that cauldron type of experience to the President's Cup.
Yeah, and you talk about day 1, the atmosphere and the vibe not being there. It did raise a question for me why Weir sent Day and Arn out as the opening pairing. Why not send some 2 Canadians out, which he paired the Canadians together a lot over the course of the week. Why not really get things off to a bang with sending out your top Canadian pair to open things up? So, as you say, lots of questions about decisions that we made over the Ford, that being one of them, certainly for me.
What did you think of the beer sculling?
I didn't see any of this, so you'll have to get me up to speed.
Who was it? I don't know. Was it Corey Connors? Was it sort of Pendra? One of those guys. So first tee,
taking a lead
first
JT's
day.
book, was it?
Yeah. Sculled a beer before you tee off. To me, like that probably reeks of the fact, or points to the fact that it's not a real competition. It's an exhibition, and that's completely fine, but it's not, we're not dealing Ryder Cup level sort of competition.
Yeah, and I think JT was after the match, wasn't it? It wasn't to start the match. So you can understand that, particularly if you've had a tight or an important victory. But to start off with a beer chug, that's unorthodox, shall we say.
Yep. Day 2, the other interesting thing that happened to me, and again, this might point to unusual decisions. So you had Morikawa paired with Theegala. Morikawa is arguably the best iron player in the game, maybe outside of Scotty. He was teeing off on the tees that weren't the par 3. So you didn't have the best iron player in the game hitting any tee shots into the 4 par 3s. And the other thing that meant is that you had Morikawa didn't get to hit iron shots into the greens on the alternate holes as well, if that makes sense. So instead of having him the par 3s, 4 par 3s, and then Theegala taking the opposite, you've got Morikawa putting, which is not incredibly strong with, and then hitting driver, which he is strong, but certainly probably not as strong as what Theegala can be. But it's just a very interesting decision.
Well, I think it plays back to giving the internationals a chance. There's some very strange choices there. And the fact that Scott beat Theegala and Morikawa 5 and 4 with Pendrith playing absolutely stinky golf says a lot. And so that's an unusual decision by the Americans and one that raises eyebrows.
So we got to Saturday pretty much all square, and the 2 sessions on Saturday were relatively uncompetitive. So I guess the US won the 3 points in the morning, and then in the afternoon they did the same thing. So they've gone 6 and 2 over the course of the Saturday.
Yeah, and really the all the talking points were less about the golf and more about what's happening in between holes and off the course. So we saw allegations of poor sportsmanship from Tom Kim against the US players. There was some insinuation that maybe Wyndham Clark had insulted some of the international players' wives, and then there were blows on Twitter between Wyndham Clark and Ben Arns. There was a bit of spice happening off the golf course, and the other sort of talking point from that particular day was around, there were two actually, Tom Kim making the obligatory complaint about not being given putts and measuring it with his putter, and also Siwoo doing the Steph Curry night gesticulation after the chip-ins. That was the talk of the golf on Saturday.
Yeah. People getting quite upset about the fact that Tom Kim is doing the putter measure. I don't really care. I think it impacts Tom Kim more than, we've discussed this previously. It impacts Tom Kim than it impacts anyone else, although having seen everyone else's, Scotty actually he didn't look too happy about it. So maybe that's got them going as well. It's probably wise for Tom Kim not to be doing that when he's not really controlling the game.
You've made a good point previously that it shows that it's actually in your head. You're focused on that rather than what you should be focused on. And then it played out the next day in the singles where he was barely given a putt at all. The Americans just played it straight back to him, and fair play to them.
Now, Wyndham, there's got to be a point where he just needs to realize he's got to be just shut up, right? Not say anything about other people, because we saw him at the Masters knock LIV, and the fact that they only pay 54 holes, and then he went on a big sort of streak of playing 36 holes, not making cuts. And then he's done it again here. He's caused a bit of trouble, made a few sort of announcements saying how close the US team is, like that they were sort of Euro level closeness and camaraderie. His record wasn't very good. He's gone 1-2-1.
Yeah, I think Wyndham's still on tilt from knocking back a big, huge bag from LIV. You knock back 50 million or reportedly 50 million because you think you're worth 100 and you're probably worth a tenth of that. And then you have some pretty ordinary results to follow. You got to be on tilt. His mind coach is not doing a job. She got him up for that US Open at LACC, but it's been all downhill since then.
Yeah. Siwoo Kim, what a rock star.
Incredible play. He's shown that he's obviously very talented. You don't win a player if you don't have great game. That golf course at Sawgrass tests the best golfers, and you have to hit the shots to win that tournament. So he's certainly got the pedigree. But going into the President's Cup, would we have said Siwoo was going to be the revelation over the first 3 days? I doubt we would have.
No, probably. I think that leads to our short memories, because he was pretty strong in the last couple of President's Cup teams he's played in. But he's probably the player that everyone thinks Tom Kim is.
That's true. The putting was incredible. The chipping was incredible. Some of the iron shots he hit were just stone dead. It was fantastic golf to watch from him over the first 3 days. And really, without his play, it could have been a total walloping.
Now, what did you think about my career running with the same players for the 2 rounds on the Saturday?
Yeah, well, I guess that meant that he didn't let Min Woo cook, or he wasn't liking what Min Woo was cooking up. I think Dan Rappaport made that point on X. So it was strange to me that Min Woo had been benched, and he played, I think, one of the first 4 sessions through Thursday through Saturday. He's someone that can get hot, and this sort of match play style could really suit him, but he just played the first day and then sat for the next 2. So that was a bit surprising. And then Jason Day also sat the whole of Saturday. You would think that being beaten 3-1 in the morning session on Saturday would have prompted a change up to the pairings, but no, just rolled with it and threw them straight back out there again.
Yep. I thought it was quite a strange decision, if not for the fact that just resting players. Adam Scott is 44. He was a trooper, but you'd have thought to give them the best advantage, particularly on the Sunday singles, just to give him a little break. And there's a lot of talent there, as you said. Like Jason Day was a big surprise for me in particular. He's been strong enough to warrant not sitting for an entire day.
That's right. It was terrible enough that you wouldn't play him the 2 sessions. Very strange decision-making on Weir's part there.
Yeah, it was. The Sunday, I didn't watch a lot of the singles really. I tuned in a little bit, but by that time, I thought it was a pretty insurmountable task for the internationals to get up and try and win that particular tournament.
Yeah, so the Americans only needed 5 points to retain the cup and 5.5 points to win it. That meant that the internationals needed 8.5 points out of the 12 singles matches. Now, when you've got a team that's boasting 9 players out of the top 20 in the OWGR, that's just very unlikely. It was as of Saturday afternoon. Day lost the opening match to Xander, 3-2. Tom Kim halved the second match with Sam Burns. Hideki did take down Scotty Scheffler, and he needed 8 birdies to actually do it, which just shows how hard it is to beat that guy. But then it meant it came down to Pendrith, the match that had Pendrith in it, and then also Siwoo Kim in order to keep the President's Cup alive. And when you're relying on Pendrith in this sort of team match play environment, it's not a good thing.
It looks like now that he's a shareholder or a stakeholder that he's really protecting his investment.
That's right. No Hat Pat definitely delivered. So beating Pendrith 3-1 on that final day, and was really a bit of a stone cold killer across the entire event.
Yeah, him and Xander, like they're super solid. Like that's pretty strong call they've got now. Xander, Pat, I guess in particular, Scotty, they're all very consistent golfers. So you're not getting a lot of fluctuation in performance. So that's a great base to build on.
Incredible base, and just the reliability and the consistency. And if you have a look at their swings, and I know Scotty's swing is not textbook, but it probably is until point of impact. It's all what happens after impact that sort of is non-textbook, but they just get into great positions. They're not overly complex or complicated swings, and that just Xander never looks like he's going to hit a bad shot.
No. Funny moment in the event for me was probably after Colin Morikawa and Thegala bet Scott and Minwoo Lee. Morikawa hit up Instagram, posted the photo of their win, and his tag for it was Chef Cooked, we ate.
The other thing that made me laugh about the chef was that I think on Friday and Saturday when he played no matches, there were people in the crowd wearing the chef's hats. They clearly weren't on the inside intel from Weir about his pickings, his pairings.
Any changes to the President's Cup?
The common one that's thrown out there is let the women play as well, make it a mixed event. I heard Brendan Porath on Shotgun Start totally shoot that down and poo that idea. Look, I don't know. Let LIV players play. That's never going to happen given it's a PGA Tour event. There's a few things that they could trial and play with. I think you're probably on the right trajectory there in terms of reducing the number of matches. Run it over 3 days instead of 4, take one of the sessions out and go from there. But adding the ladies in would certainly make it more competitive because of that sort of Australasian impact that would be boosting to the international team's talent stocks. Is that possible with the calendars, with the complexity of what's going on in world golf at the moment? Don't really know.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it is what it is. Adding the LIV players wouldn't have changed it too much because probably it strengthened the US team more than it did the international team, bringing in Bryce and potentially Brooks. So that would add a little bit more interest to it, but not a lot. But being a PGA Tour product, you can't see that really happening.
No.
And then, I don't know, if you incorporate the Euros in some way, that might be fun.
Yeah, or what I'd probably prefer to just leave it alone and then create the LIV v PGA Tour event, which we know there would be plenty of juice in that. And there'd be some real heated passion from fans on both sides and also just general golf fans that want to watch all sorts of golf, whether it be PGA Tour and LIV. So I think that'd be the better investment in time, is trying to get that product off the ground rather than fix the problems with the President's Cup.
The interesting thing with that, and again, if I'll spend a bit of time on Rank Eagle and looking at sort of world rankings and comparisons for this style of events, it would be beneficial for the PGA Tour to promote that sort of live sort of PGA Tour event, because if we're looking at world rankings and whatnot, that is way more lopsided than any of the others. I think the average world ranking of the Americans was sitting in and around or the PGA Tour was sitting around 12 or 13 and LIV was sort of 38, 40. So it would, in my opinion, create some really potentially lopsided events in favor of the PGA Tour. So it would be in their interest, I think, in the short to medium term to actually get this up and running because they would dominate.
Yeah, I doubt they'll see it that way though, or giving LIV more credibility and legitimacy. I hope they see it the way that you've described as an opportunity to ram home their ascendancy and domination because I think it'd be great for golf fans to watch.
Now, obviously, world rankings, like that's just one aspect. There's a lot more match play in it. In itself is a very different beast to what stroke play is. I'm not here saying that the world rankings is what decides who wins or not, but in terms of just a general skill level, it is a big aspect to it as well.
I think at an individual level, you're right. Rankings don't mean too much, and you're right, with individual pairings, you're able to fight fire with fire to some extent. But I do think the rankings in aggregate do give you an indication of where the balance of talent is, although we know that using OWGR is still got a large asterisk beside it and is heavily qualified.
I think that's actually another interesting thing because I was thinking there was a lot. This President's Cup, I think, was probably the first that I've seen of those team events where there was a heavy there was not reliance, but there was a lot of discussion on social media around strokes gained, the data golf strokes gained. And that in itself to me it's hard to look at even strokes gained data round to round. And for the majority of this event, we weren't even seeing full rounds. So you had the alternate shot. So we're not even seeing players perform hitting their normal 70-odd shots in a particular round of golf, really use that to make pairings on or whatnot.
Yeah, I was listening to President's Cup recap and they were rating players based on their record and then their strokes gained for the event. And look, it's a bit of an artificial number. It certainly has its limitations. It's the only number that's there. So I guess they threw it into the mix to try and provide some sort of additional comparison data on top of just the straight win-loss draw record. But I think it's not overly reliable given the nature of this particular event.
It's great on the macro. There's just too many sort of individuals. When you start looking at the micro and individual shot level or round level data, it's wildly inaccurate. So I think on the macro, looking back over historically, it's great data, but performance data and building teams on it based on what's happening in a particular event, I think is problematic.
Yeah, and I don't think any individual player will be using the data coming out of the President's Cup or regarding strokes gained to make any changes to their game or work on any particular areas. So it's a number. It's something that you might throw into the mix like what the NLU guys did, but you don't place too much reliance on it.
Yep. Now, final point on the President's Cup before we switch across to the DP World Tour. Saturday, we saw an hour and a half fog delay, and then we nearly saw them having to suspend play because of darkness. Not many games, so what was there, 4 in each session, so 4 games on the golf course, one of them being alternate shot, so you not even got 4 balls down on the golf course, you got 2. And we're nearly running out of daylight. What's going on?
Yeah, the pace of play was pretty bad, particularly in that afternoon session. Tom Kim, he is just so slow. Stands over the ball for ages. I don't know if we're in JB Holmes territory, but we're not far off. And then you got likes of Harmon in there as well with his waggles. It's not good watching, is it? Just before we do move on from the President's Cup, we do need to address the elephant in the room, and we have called out Pendrith for his woeful play, not just this time round, but last President's Cup, he was absolute shithouse as well. He was so bad this time round that I saw Tron Carter tweet out that we should just, this is Saturday afternoon, sit him for the singles match on Sunday and take the loss without even sending him out, which I thought was very good. But is he now in the never to be picked again category?
No, I think, again, we've got what you have to do to not get picked again.
He has in the last 2 President's Cup.
Play like he has. So I think our memories are too short for that.
And I think he got some points this time around because Adam Scott carried him.
Yeah. 2-step Pat Reed just upset the apple cart, the team environment. That gets you not picked again. But
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, like, in hindsight, seeing them skip over Cam Davis was And even like Hadwin and who was the
Nick
other?
Taylor.
There was a couple of Canadian. So skipping over those guys and making the picks they did was very interesting. Hard to see why Weary did it.
Yeah, Cam Davis was inside the top 12 on points. And there, we had talked about this in the lead up to the President's Cup, that we knew there were going to be captain's picks siding with the Canadians to try and build on the home team advantage, the home crowd enthusiasm. I just didn't think Pendrith was the right pick. I probably would have gone Hadwin. Now he's had some questionable form, but he has shown that he can perform on home soil in front of home crowds. So yeah, we got it wrong on a lot of occasions, I think, this time around, and it's all there in the scorebook to be read now.
Right, over on the DP World Tour, we had the Spanish Open. There was some question marks coming into the event whether or not Rahm was going to get up for it. He's come off the illness. He flew in on the Wednesday, I think, having announced that his wife gave birth, so he's killed a couple of stuff. Went home in between LIV, recovered, had a baby, attended the event. I questioned last week whether or not he was going to be able to get himself up. He certainly did. He performed really well. Angel Hidalgo was the eventual winner in a 2-hole playoff with Rahm. The final day was very exciting.
Doesn't this show that all the speculation and hype about Rahm not being the player that he was now that he's taken the bag from LIV is just total garbage? He's showing that he's competed all around the world, and he might have preferred a better majors performance this particular year round, but he just continues to compete and contest at the highest levels all around the world. So he's an incredible player. I'd be disappointed to get knocked off in the playoff. Really interesting hole, the 18th. Great finishing hole, being a short sort of drivable par 4. So it provided for plenty of theatre and drama at the final stages there. But Rahm just not able to get the birdie on the second playoff hole. Hidalgo was able to do so and take the win.
Yeah, so he's performed pretty much all through the event, Hidalgo. He looked fairly comfortable in doing so. Coming into the final round, Puig started off hot and got himself, I think, out to sort of 3 or 4 strokes at one particular point. Hidalgo dropped all the way back also. Puig made a few mistakes, had sort of 3 bogeys over the course of 3 or 4 holes, and then just fell in there or collapsed, really. He looked like he was the guy to beat 3 or 4 shots up.
Yeah, and he'd be gutted by that. Really great for the Spanish to have the 3 Spaniards in the final group. The eventual winner, Rambo and Puig, all playing together in that final group. And it was a seesawing affair. As you said, Puig got himself out to win. Rahm held the lead at various times throughout the final round as well. And then the young Spaniard, who was a spectator at this event only a number of years ago, gets the W and knocks off the big bull Rambo.
Yep. Even I think Rambo he was 2 back with 2 to play.
Yeah, finished. He got forced the playoff, which just shows the determination and the grit that the guys got.
Yeah. And we saw Hidalgo miss a relatively short putt to force that playoff. Seeing someone like a Rahm do what he did to close it out, like the pressure that it puts on other players, you're sort of like with Tiger. There aren't many golfers in the world that would. I think Scotty now would certainly do it. Rambo, possibly Rory. There wouldn't be many outside of those guys.
Are you having Rory putting 6 or 8 feet to save your life?
If he has the lead, no.
He's coming from behind.
But if he's...
Yeah, it was a backdoor.
Yeah.
It's for a backdoor top 5.
Yeah,
absolutely having him. What about, did you see the clutch up and down flop shot from Angel on 14? That to me was a pivotal moment. He was out of position off the tee, short-sighted himself on the right-hand side, trouble in terms of bunkers and rough and all sorts of shit, and then just hits this full-blooded flop shot and leaves himself with a relatively short birdie putt that he drains to make birdie. That was certainly a pivotal moment for me in that final round. Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of praise being heaped on the DP World Tour over the course of the last few weeks, continuing on again this week with the Alfred Dunhill. I think a lot of that comes down to getting slightly stronger fields with a few LIV guys playing and whatnot. But also I think the other thing that is a huge factor that maybe we're not considering as much is just the fact that we're going to just the variance of the golf course. So we're seeing so many different styles of golf on the Euro Tour, which you just don't see on the PGA Tour. And that adds to the entertainment value.
Exactly, and it's why there's such interest and hope for a global tour. This last few weeks and this week that's coming have been great weeks of golf on the DP World Tour. As you say, it's a combination of different countries, different styles of golf course, and a combination of LIV players, DP World Tour players, and PGA Tour players all playing in the same event. So it's almost parading and demonstrating what can be possible if the governing bodies can get their act together. Sadly, it's unlikely that we're going to see that. But this field for the Spanish Open was certainly a strong field. There were several of the world's top golfers in terms of Hatton, Reed, Lowry, Tommy Fleetwood, Rahm, and the event coming up for Alfred Dunhill is going to be even stronger.
Yeah, let's switch across to this week's events. So we have on the PGA Tour the Sanderson Farms Championship.
Snoozer.
We've got a lot written down about it, but it's a snoozer. I don't think, as we said previously, I think it's great that these events are here because it creates a little bit of separation between those and the signature events. I think there's one mistake that the PGA Tour is making with these full season events, and these are to keep your card for next season. I think they should flip that. And this should be to get your card for next season. So combine it with the Corn Ferry guys and then make this essentially the Corn Ferry finals. So pull in all these PGA Tour guys, all the Corn Ferry guys, and make it the qualifying series to get back onto the PGA Tour.
That's right, because look at who we've got playing at the Sanderson. We've got Bill Haas, Chuck Hoffman, JB Holmes. That's indicative of the strength of this particular field. So it's not lighting anyone up to be tuning in, really.
And these guys aren't playing next year.
No, I wouldn't have.
They're just filling the field.
That's right. So definitely needs to be some change. And for those that are interested in tuning in and seeing Chuck Hoffman and Bill Haas, you can see it from 10 o'clock on Thursday night, featured groups.
I just can't see how they're going to keep $7.6 million event. I can't see how I can keep the money into those events.
What's Sanderson getting for that sort of money? I can't imagine that the TV ratings are going to be very good at all. And so that doesn't seem to be an economic equation that's got any longevity in it.
All eyeballs are going to be on St Andrews, the old course, among the other two courses for the Alfred Dunhill Links. So that has got a jam-packed field. We've got Matty Fitz, McIlroy, Fleetwood, Lowry, Horschel, and a bunch of the LIV guys as well.
Yeah, Billy Boy Horschel, honorary Brit or honorary European now. So a good selection of PGA Tour players there. And then, as you say, a bunch of LIV guys, which going deep on some of the LIV guys there in terms of Usti, Gooch, Burmey, all sort of playing on top of Koepka, Rahm, Hatton. So I think this is a great event. It's going to be good watching. You've got the three courses, Kings Barnes, Carnoustie, and the old course at St Andrews. What's not to love? And so I'll certainly be tuning in from 9 p.m. on Thursday.
Yeah, so we're still missing like a Poulter, Ian Poulter. I think they wanted him playing, but because he's gone through that sort of court process and was denied, I think that's like the way he's not playing. So there's a few like that, Westy maybe to some extent, but it's interesting then that you got Usti and Burmey playing there as well because they started the season on the DP World Tour.
Yeah, and I was
in South Africa.
Well, I was surprised that Smithy wasn't playing. He was a notable omission from when I was having a look at the entries last night. So I thought this would be a great event for Cam to go and play, but he's obviously wanting to have a bit of a break.
Yeah. He's going to have a long season, not a long summer. He's coming out. He's playing 3 events at the moment, I think, in Australia. Probably most likely a 4th event being the Australian Open, which he hasn't confirmed.
So what's the overs and unders line on kilograms gained by Smithy this Australian summer?
Herbie as well, actually. Herbie was mentioning in the previous event that
is it 5.5 plus or minus 5.5 kilos?
I think we're coming into 2025 very similar to what we finished 23, 24. They're going to be on the back foot again, I think.
Extra 50 mil in the Ripper team kitty. I'm sure there'll be some team building and team bonding events in Australia when all the boys get back here.
Yeah. They can have Have some fun. Now, we saw the LPGA, there's no events, so they're heading to China next week. So they've got a week off. We saw a hurricane rip through Augusta. So there's a lot of devastation there. Saw some pictures released, some drone footage of Magnolia Lane at Augusta National. It's a dire situation for everyone affected. Augusta released a release pretty much saying the same thing, that they've sustained some damage, but their thoughts more to the greater community. Hard to see that shot. I studied what I could of the golf course, the 18th and the 9th. Didn't look like there was a great deal of damage on the course itself. Certainly Magnolia Lane looked like he had a lot sort of damage there. So it'd be interesting to see in and around Rays Creek what sort of damage is done there. I believe there is potentially some course altering damage done.
Yeah, as you say, Magnolia Lane looked a bit of a mess, and around 9 and 18, that's all pretty open there. You're probably not expecting too much damage there, but as you get down the back there, you've got 11 and 12 and 13. That's along the boundary line there with Augusta Country Club. I suspect that there's lots of damage in through Amen Corner, down the 10th, on to the left of the 10th and to the right of the 10th. There's plenty of trees around. Hopefully the damage is not too great. Certainly thoughts to the communities in Florida and Atlanta and elsewhere that were hit hard. I did see that Zach Blair posted some photos of the tree farm, which I think is in South Carolina near Aiken and not too far from Augusta as well. I think his course largely fared okay, but by the tone of his comments, there certainly were other courses in the Aiken area, and there's some awesome golf courses in that particular part of South Carolina that have been hit pretty hard.
There's a lot of love for match play over the weekend. So obviously with the President's Cup, and talk about maybe playing a bit more match play. We've heard a little bit from LIV in terms of expect to see more match play. I had a bit of a think about how to structure that. So for me, I think it'd be quite easy for LIV to be able to split up their events into their current stroke play events and a match play series. So you could have working on the basis of 14 rounds and working on the basis that we're going to add 2 teams this year to bring it up to 60 players. I think a good way to do it would be to split it 8 stroke play events and have 6 match play events. And the way I would structure that is focusing on the match play with 15 teams. You would have a bye each day, so 3 days per event. First 5 events would be essentially like a regular season with a points table. Each day a team would play another. And so over the course of the first 4 plus 2 days of the 5th event, each team would play each other once. You would leave that final day of the 5th event to essentially arrange seedings. So you might have like the top 4 or 5 playoff on the final day to get a bye in the first round of the final season. You might have a little wildcard section there where some of the lower teams can make their way into the finals. And then you would have the team championship event, which would arrange the winner. And the way I'd structure it would be to have the first half of the season, or the majority of the first half of the season, focus on the stroke play. As we said last week, I might put in behind each of the 4 majors one of the match play events. And then once the Open is finished, you would have the 5th and the 6th event for match play. And you'd probably have to find a couple of events for the stroke play finals to finish up as well. But I think that would be a good way to do it potentially. So you've got like 2 relatively compelling competitions, being the stroke play, and that's just the way golf has been played. So I think you need to really get some sort of season going around that as well. The only impact I could see potentially for the match play events would be like, if you're playing seasonal match play events, you don't have a final winner on day 3, so you don't have a podium. So I don't know. That's the only thing I can't work out.
And look, I think playing with the schedule and the format like this is something that LIV should 100% be considering, particularly if the new signings cupboard is bare, because it needs to maintain momentum. It needs to maintain eyeballs or attract new eyeballs. One way that you could certainly do that and differentiate yourself from the PGA Tour significantly would be to offer people more match play opportunities. So I like your thinking. Hopefully you're on the phone to Uncle Greg letting him know your thoughts.
I don't have his
Greg,
number.
We know you're listening.
Oh, there you go. Well, look, I think that's it for this one.
I did see, speaking of LIV for next year, I did see Andy Ogletree out there talking up the LIV promotions event later in the year, I think in December, saying that he's expecting a number of current PGA Tour players to be heading over and trying to qualify. We did see some of that last year. Kevin Chappell was one that went over. There's another couple whose names just escaped me. Kevin Tway, I thought maybe I might have that wrong, but certainly Kevin Chappell went over with a couple of others. Be interesting to see if Andy Ogletree's right. You probably wouldn't come out and say that if you didn't have a firm view that it was going to happen. Do you have any thoughts on who might go and have a crack?
I think there'd be a lot that potentially could. So last year, what essentially happened, I believe, is that the PGA Tour come out and said, or at least to their members, said that it wasn't an unauthorized event, pending further information. Was then announced so late that they essentially said that no, you couldn't, because media releases had to be done 45 days or something like that, 45 days prior to an event, and it ended up being inside that period. So it was a bit of an unknown whether or not anyone who went and played would be banned. So there was a little bit of discussion around, because LIV ended up televising the event and paying competition, that maybe that's the PGA Tour said that. So depending on that, let's have a hypothetical here, and let's say that it is not an unauthorized event and that we're outside of 45 days periods, which we certainly are. So let's say anyone can come and play and not get banned. The people I think it benefits the most is those in and around sort of 125 on the PGA Tour. So they're the guys that are missing out next year. If we're looking at Kieran Vincent, who's currently ranked 462 in the world, Vince Whaley is currently in 126th position, which is no tour card for next year. He's ranked 172 in the world. So that strengthens that bottom end of LIV. So there's an advantage there for LIV. Kieran Vincent made 2.4 million or 2.24 million on LIV this year. Vince Whaley made 730,000. Vince Whaley played 19 events. Kieran Vincent played 14.
Neither of them played in any majors, nor would they have.
Yes. So for players like Vince Whaley, like, it makes sense financially. They're playing less. They're earning a shitload more. And for LIV, there's a massive advantage because they're strengthening the tour. Like, people will say, what's Vince Whaley going to do? And you're absolutely right. He's not going to add anything to LIV in terms of the top end of LIV, but he is strengthening the bottom end. So based on that, if I was the PGA Tour, I'd be finding a way to ban anyone from.
And look, they probably will, although I'm not sure attracting the bottom rung of the PGA Tour is necessarily a good thing for LIV. If it strengthens the field, I suspect it would be marginal in terms of its overall impact. But you might have some of the hard luck cases from the Corn Ferry Tour having a look and going, maybe I might come across. And I think that would be a more exciting prospect for LIV, to be attracting some of the hard luck stories, or those that just had a tough break but have got plenty of talent from Corn Ferry. If I go and qualify, that's a $2 million guarantee, and that's where I'm at.
Certainly, I see some level of promotion, I think, is vital, but just in terms of having that pipeline of young potential superstar, because you're not going to survive just cherry-picking players. We know at the moment the DP World Tour, the Corn Ferry Tour, pretty much global golf is controlled by the PGA Tour in terms of that pipeline. So that LIV has the Asian Tour, which they're investing in. We've discussed it previously that the strength of the Asian Tour is not there in terms of quality, standard, and for coming up to LIV. So you can't really give too many positions to season-long participants on the Asian Tour just yet. I think, and that will be the end goal, is to promote people from the Asian Tour, the season-long Asian Tour standings. But I think that's still a few years away, because we need to strengthen that particular product in order to do it. And maybe that's like the end goal, is to get someone like that would take either the DP World Tour or the Corn Ferry Tour as their pathway and try and qualify for LIV on the Asian Tour. So I think that will be the end goal. It certainly adds. I think it's some level of promotion is good for the tour, but we're not talking superstars or anyone that's going to come and make an impact on LIV at the moment.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. And we did have those comments made by Phil as well earlier in the year around teams owning their own courses and then turning those courses into sort of incubators, talent development academies for the LIV players of the future. So I think there's some mileage in that as well. But of course, you need the sort of feedstock to go into those. So as you say, that's still years away from coming to fruition.
Yep. It's going to be interesting nonetheless. I think this will be a lot stronger field than it has been in.
I agree with that.
All right, Lukey.
Thanks, Jake. Another good session. We'll look forward to chatting next week about the Alfred Dunhill.
Well, to recap, we'll probably have another good event there.
I think it will be next week.
Thanks for tuning in.